This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, the Trump campaign has finally filed its first election lawsuit of the cycle. This is what we've been waiting for and looking to. Can you speak on what it was and how worried you are about it?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It has been 3 years since Donald Trump's campaign has been in court. And they have been waiting for the moment, and the moment they have picked is a lawsuit in Nevada that seeks to invalidate a Nevada law that allows ballots that are postmarked by Election Day to be counted. These are mail-in ballots that are postmarked by Election Day to be counted, even if they come in a day or two after the election. This is a big issue. Many states have similar laws, and this has become a much more heightened issue in states like Nevada that have moved predominantly to vote by mail, at the same time that DeJoy at the U.S. Postal Service continues to cut back on the Postal Service, and therefore mail moves slower. So this is a very, very important lawsuit. We've heard Laura Trump lie about this lawsuit already, and it is no surprise that here we have, Donald Trump's campaign finally weighing in court again.
Why do you think it was important for the Trump campaign to start with this specific lawsuit?
Yeah, so I think it combines several components of their overall plan. The first is it targets mail-in voting, and we know that Donald Trump and the RNC, even though they seem to be somewhat hot and cold on this, fundamentally they are anti-vote by mail. They are litigating around the country against vote by mail, so it fits within their strategic narrative to make vote by mail harder. The second is, it plays into something that, this is a canary in a coal mine. Okay, they are planting this seed about when ballots should stop being counted, right? So this lawsuit is actually about ballots postmarked by Election Day that come in after the election. But we already heard Laura Trump characterize some of these lawsuits as if it is kind of the stop the count, right? It is that they should stop counting at midnight on election night. And I don't know, maybe we can just show that clip.
Yeah.
Counting ballots past Election Day. What are you doing with regard to suing Nevada right now?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You cannot have ballots counted, Maria, after elections are over. And right now, that is one of the many lawsuits we have out across this country to ensure that just that happens, that we have a free, fair, and transparent election. So in Nevada, as you pointed out, we are saying we want on Election Day that to be the last day that mail-in ballots can be counted.
Yeah, so you can see that that she is sort of conflating the issue of stop the count, right, which was Donald Trump saying we don't count any ballots, we stop counting on election night, with this more subtle issue about ballots that are coming in after Election Day. But it's a real window into what the ultimate motivation is here, which I believe is to say three things. Number one, Election Day is only one day. You hear Donald Trump in his campaign say that all the time. What does that mean? That means no early voting, no ballots coming in after Election Day. Number two, we stop counting on election night. What does that mean? That means in states like Pennsylvania, where Republicans refuse to allow the counting of ballots to begin early enough to be done on election night, those mail-in ballots don't get counted at all. So I don't think it's any mistake that the RNC and the Trump campaign brought this lawsuit, nor that Donald Trump put his name on this one as the first lawsuit of the cycle.
Well, does this signal that, for example, in future lawsuits, that this is the issue that they're going to continue focusing on in states outside of Nevada?
Yeah, absolutely, and they already are focused on this in states outside of Nevada. This is going to be one of the big fights of the 2024 election cycle in court. They are intent on shrinking the periods of voting and vote counting, because if they can say ballots that are postmarked by Election Day that come in after Election Day shouldn't count, how far is it to really go to the confusion that Laura Trump is already starting to sow?
Right. Well, what resources can they allocate to lawsuits like this by virtue of it being a Trump campaign lawsuit versus some other lawsuit by the RNC, for example, or outside groups? Like, is there special deference paid, or are there special resources allocated because this is a Trump campaign lawsuit, the first one?
Yeah, I mean, Brian, we're going to give you an honorary law degree from the Elias School of Law, the Democracy School of Law, okay? Because that's like, you hit it right on the head, right? What has plagued so many of the conservative and Republican lawsuits has been this issue of standing, right? Who has standing? Who has the right to go to court and say, we are not sort of just ideologically interested in this, we're not hypothetically interested in this, but this actually affects us. And so a lot of these other lawsuits that we've seen brought by some of the conservative allies, they run into these standing problems. who has the strongest standing in any election case? The candidate, right? Because the candidate can say, look, we are the Trump campaign. We stand for election. And if these ballots count, some of them are going to be against us, and that gives us standing. So it's no mistake that they add some legal heft here. But I think the big reason they did it was the rhetorical heft. They want to signal to their faithful that whatever other words you may hear out of Donald Trump's mouth, whatever other words you may, that Republicans are forced to say about absentee voting, they're against it. They're against vote by mail. And by the way, everyone out there, I hope you realize some of the big losers in this lawsuit, if they're successful, are going to be our men and women in uniform who vote by mail from overseas. And so, for all of the rhetoric that Republicans have about our members of the military, just think about that.
To that point, then, do we have the resources to bat back the lawsuits that are about to come?
I hope so. Look, my law firm, we are already in court in more than 50 cases in 20 some odd states, and we're not the only ones litigating. There are lots of other organizations and groups as well. But there's no question that the other side has a well-funded, well-coordinated spider web of litigation outfits challenging free and fair elections. And that's before, by the way, that's before you get to the other groups challenging free and fair elections through other means. And so there's a lot of money on the other side sloshing around this. Plus, election denialism is the central movement of the RNC right now. They replaced the RNC chair because they wanted a more full-throated election denier, litigation-focused chair. And so, I hope that democracy holds, and I hope that there are sufficient commitment and resources on the Democratic and progressive side to fight back. I know this, you will find me, you'll have to drag me out of the courthouse, on the last of these lawsuits before I let democracy fall to the hands of someone like Donald Trump.
You did mention, in terms of those resources, Democracy Docket, which is the free news outlet you founded to focus on everything voting and elections, is one of those resources I use on a daily basis. So for those watching right now, if you're not yet signed up, please make sure to sign up. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, we've seen, to your earlier point, there was over about 65 lawsuits seeking to undermine the election results in different states. They've spent this pre-election cycle right now trying to undermine the rules that were put in place to allow ballots to be counted. They've been unsuccessful thus far. Which is to say nothing of the fact that they're still going to continue to plow forward in an attempt to be successful. But in the losses that they've sustained, does that establish precedent that makes it more difficult for them moving forward, or do they just have to get in front of one friendly judge and then precedent goes out the window and they can move forward with some success?
All right, we're going to give you like an honorary doctorate in law now. Like you're hitting on all cylinders today. I think you hit it right. Which is the problem is that we have to win almost all the time, and they just have to win one big case.
Yeah.
And yes, every time they lose, it creates precedent, and that's good, right? Like precedent is precedent. But we have seen the tragedy of courts ignoring precedent. We saw the tragedy of Roe v. Wade, which was something that even conservative nominees for the Supreme Court described as precedent upon precedent.
Yeah.
Some of them described it as super precedent in their confirmation hearings, and yet, here we are after Dobbs. So I like to think that these cases, you build on wins, and one win gets you another win, but we have to be vigilant in court every single time because you never know which way a particular judge is going to go.
Well, to that point then, it would lend itself to reason that, if Republicans do manage to get a win in some state court, and this is involving federal elections, that it would eventually hop over to the federal court system and could ultimately make its way to the Supreme Court. I mean, if there's some catastrophic ruling that would basically say you can't count any ballots after midnight, it would get appealed and it would go all the way to the top. So assuming the Supreme Court were to hear something like this, is there any precedent at the Supreme Court that would suggest how they would rule on an issue like this?
Yeah, I mean, look, every fiber in my body and every precedent that exists in the Supreme Court's books says that claim by the Republicans would be laughed out of court.
But the fact is, we're still dealing with a Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Amy Coney Barrett court right now.
Well, what I was going to say is, like, we're waiting on a decision about whether or not, presidents can assassinate their political opponents and stage coups. And that was actually entertained in the Supreme Court as a very serious argument. So, like, is there any precedent that says you can throw away lawful votes because the election officials didn't finish counting by midnight? No, they can't do that. That's crazy. That would violate several provisions of the U.S. Constitution and federal law. But I also would have told you that that presidents being able to assassinate their political opponents would have also violated the Constitution, no less not be constitutionally protected.
Right. I guess that's a great point. Well, we will of course stay on top of this issue as it continues to work its way through the court system. But hopefully, we have enough precedent and enough sense within the judicial system to ensure that doesn't happen. With that said, again, for those watching right now, if you want to support the invaluable work that Mark and his team are doing, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.